have a drone with the capability to take the information, combine the information, and then taking decision. This is a near future, but the artificial intelligence today is in use. It's nothing for the future. Today, we have some level of artificial intelligence already in use. Next. What about Latin America and the Caribbean? What we have and what we know. Israel is a country that got most business in unmanned system. Israel, in the last 3 years, 2012 to 2015, is making business in different countries for more than $500 million. And again, technology is now in the hand of a small elite. Technology with this globalized world that we live in is all over. Brazil is developing drones, and Brazil is making business with several countries in Africa. And also, you see Peru with South Korea. Uruguay is making business with Sweden. And last year, in 2012, UNASUR, they announced a plan to make all countries members to participate in a program. But this is just government. And this is part of the equation. It's not the entire country. It's a good step, yes. How far they want to go, we don't know yet. Because they announced this last year, nothing has happened so far in almost 1 year. Next. Drones produced in the region. And here you got the countries. That drone that you see in the photo is drone from Argentina. Using drones, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Uruguay, Venezuela. They are some in project, other are all has been used, but the region is using this. How are we prepared to use drones? What is the legal framework? Where is the policy? What is the strategy? Reviewing policies and strategy all over the region, it doesn't show up. It doesn't say anything about it, but it's there, and they are using. Next. What are the current issues? How drones are involved in the region? Look at the combating narco-trafficking, all the multidimensional threat that we are affecting. Drones are involved in this, combating urban crime, surveillance of public protest, particularly in Brazil. With the last public protest in Brazil, they use a lot. In Venezuela and other countries, using a lot. What about privacy? What about the individual? Are we prepared to give this the right framework? Why this is not in the policy and strategy yet, but we are using. Next. Concern in the use. And again, we don't have in the region the legal framework, breaches of sovereignty. It was a complaint last year. Colombia complained, Venezuela complains against Colombia because it was using the drones in the border. But you see, nothing happened. It's just complain and yes, letting go. And this is issue that we need to take into consideration. Also, it's a tendency to deal this with the military institutions. If you use in the military institution, then think about how to use drones, but in the offensive role. Are you going to use it? Who is going to use it? Is the police forces? The militaries? Who is going to use it? How far they want to go? What kind of armament they are going to use? Who is going to regulate that? Nobody knows at this time. Alienation of public, obviously, and the public debate need to be there in our countries. If you go to countries and the people, well, yes, we heard about it, but nobody's talking and giving guidance and discussions in universities, think tanks, and even inside the government. Need more discussion to be better prepared. Next. I just to come to these conclusions that the major concern today in the region is that we are not prepared. We need to prepare better. The government has the major role, but also is, when I say prepare, is each of us, because, you know, this threat using this digital technology is not affecting or a threat just for a country where you can use the armed forces and this is it. No, it's also to the individual, because with a drone you can follow an attack and kill someone. And how you are going to act, how your legal system deal with that, nobody knows. Are we waiting until we are affected for this kind of technology? Same thing for cybersecurity. Most people don't realize when you lose your identity or they got all your information, what they can do. They can disappear you from the world. I mean, not physically, but you can be in the bankruptcy. Then I think this is time to do. And also some kind of consideration is developing confidence security building measures. How we are going to work in this, how we are going to be confident, how we are going to cooperate in this, how we are going to deal with the policies. Are we thinking about to have a policy and a strategy at the regional level? Because nobody can assure to have a real security in the cyberspace or the use of unmanned system in the country without cooperation with your neighbors. Then it is another aspect that need to take into consideration. Developing security building measures to use this kind of technology and be more cooperative, to be better prepared to confront this problem. Well, I will stop here and thank you.
Very much. So as you can see from our panel of experts, we've actually heard from General Ruggiero some amazing things that drones can do in terms of surveillance, search and rescue, the monitoring of agricultural and energy sector pieces. We've also seen how they could be weaponized, right, in terms of actually being devices of perhaps potentially weapons of mass destruction in a different vein. And also you've actually highlighted the need for regulation and, more importantly, this cooperation of the different sectors. And then we've heard from Dr. Trevino really what the Internet of Things. I actually look forward to when it's really cold here in Washington that my car will start and be very warm before I go down and get into it. But also you told me during lunch that someone could take it hostage or could actually poison me with carbon monoxide. So there's a dark side to that. But more, you also take a look at how quickly technology is developing, and unfortunately the government is not set up to be that quick and, more importantly, scalable to respond. And you also called for more collaboration with different sectors of society. And then we finished up with Boris taking a look at what's happening in Latin America, and more importantly how cyber affects every single thing that we do. It creates and, more importantly, enables critical infrastructure, but even more so for all the things that it gives us in terms of benefits, our ability to Skype, our ability to transmit our hemispheric forum to all those who are watching us virtually. We've also seen that there's a dark side. And unfortunately, we're not at the point yet, even in the United States, we don't have legislation on how we define cybersecurity and what your rights are. And more importantly, is cyber public good? These are great questions that we have to start to grapple with, But if anything, we saw that the pace of evolution of these emerging technologies is really at a pace that is unprecedented and, more importantly, creating tremendous complex problems. But we always say here at NDU, the wicked problem set, at how governments within a country, but more importantly within a region and internationally, needs to start to define how we can move along with emerging technologies without hindering it, but also taking a look and safeguarding from the dark side of the manipulation of these. So we're going to go to questions and answers. What I ask is that it be a question, so it has to end with a question mark, okay? And if you could identify yourself, and also for those who are not from the United States, if you can identify your name and your title, as well as your country, it would be very helpful for our speakers. And if you could direct it to a specific person, that would be great. Here in the middle of the aisle. Microphones.
Thank you. Mi pregunta es para Marty.
Oh, momentito. How are we going to do the translation, guys?
Okay.
Can I have one of the interpreters come and interpret for them because they don't have...
María Teresa Velandria, Venezuela.
Momentito, que venga la
Okay.
intérprete para verlo.
Seconds.
Vamos a hacerlo consecuencialmente, entonces usted va a hablar una frase y ella va a traducir para que todos puedan hacerlo. ¿Está bien? Okay. Can you give her the microphone because you're going to do this? Yeah. No, because the rest of the audience won't know it is in English. Okay? So she's going to do one sentence, then you'll do a consecutive. Is that okay?
Ok. María Teresa Velandria, Venezuela. Mi pregunta es para el doctor Marty Trevino. Usted usa una frase que me llama la atención y quisiera que la desarrollara. Debemos trabajar en modelos de defensa activa a través de algoritmos que sean capaces de reaccionar segundos antes o después de que ocurra un evento. Estamos hablando de que la inteligencia artificial va a tomar decisiones en materia de defensa antes que las personas.
Yes, you made a phrase, or you mentioned something that really caught my attention a few minutes ago. You talked about how we need to work more proactively using algorithms, and you said that we need to use these rational methods in order to anticipate problems and have very proactive decision-making processes. Can you elaborate on that?
I think she was looking at offensive, the use of offensive. Defensa activa means offensive use of cyber.
Yeah. Okay. So you touch on a couple of subjects there. Using rational algorithms, using machine learning, we're simply not going to be able to respond in the future as we have responded in the past. As a matter of fact, in the past, it's not working today. Our models are not working today. We have to learn what I say is left of boom versus staying right of boom. Proactive is better than reactive. There's all kinds of research going on right now in both the U.S. and Europe that I'm somewhat familiar with that is taking this to the next level. We're simply going to have to build into the systems. We're going to have to respond at speed and at scale, and there is no way for human beings to do that. By the time I go over, I sense make, I interpret, I go to my boss and tell him, we gather around, it's too late. So the research and the things that are going on right now all revolve around several different concepts. They go around different acronyms. Active cyber defense, if you will, is just the one that comes to mind, ACD type things. But basically, this research is pulling together, in some cases it's pulling together individual programs and scripts from on-the-shelf programs right now, linking up in unique ways. I mean, most of the large antivirus type companies, you know, Symantec, those type of companies are all doing stuff around this. The companies like FireEye, which which do active monitoring of networks and gateways and things. All of this is happening in those realms. I think there are two critical lessons to take out of here, and it is that we have to go to this type of a model. We have to go to an active cyber defense type model to be able to react at speed and at scale across the globe. And we have to go back and take a look. We have to go back to strategy, if you will. Is your agency or your relation, are you fundamentally allocating your resources left of boom or right of boom? And what we found in those cases is that 80% of the resources are right, because CERT teams are really cool and really sexy. Wearing a logo jacket, walking around saving the day is great, except it doesn't work. We look really good doing it, but it doesn't work. What is really cool and sexy is machine learning, algorithms, high-powered computing, on-net monitoring, and instant reaction, all the way to the future state where we envision a compromised network being able to be dissipated and reconstituted instantly somewhere else, having integrated all of the learning that just happened. So as it's reconstituted 5 seconds later in another virtual environment, it's unpenetrable because of the lessons it learned 5 seconds earlier. Remember the Borg from Star Trek? We need to think in those ways. That every bullet that hits it, the system learns. And even if you compromise the network, it will simply collapse and reconstitute somewhere else. So as the user, I will only see a few seconds of downtime, but the system behind the scenes will never go down. It is constantly reacting and learning, pivoting, moving across the globe at speed. That's where we have to get to. So as you go back and people say, we had to hire 1,000 more forensic analysts, you're going to make a dent, but that's it. We're not concerned with cleanup on aisle 9. We want to get ahead of the problem and prevent it altogether. So strategy and method of solution is the only way we're going to do it. Again, think of it this way, 50 billion connected devices talking to each other in ways we cannot even model today. How are we spending our money? Which way are we going? Policy is important. Strategy is pivotal. But then putting our money and research into solutions that are scalable at speed and at scale. Nothing else will work. I hope that answers your question.
Next. There's one here in the front. Here, she's here. Just physically walk over to her.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Esther Brimmer at George Washington University, and also at McCarty Associates, and previously at the State Department, where I spent some time worrying about the International Civil Aviation Organization. So I want to pick up on Major General Ruggiero's very interesting presentation about the UAVs issue, and ask you a bit more about what you see in terms of international cooperation. And would you see this where we have work at the ICAO level down to national, or national, regional, internationally? And secondly, to relate to the point is, of course, that is a government-to-government body. How do we then engage the private sector, which is crucial? And finally, to take to the point about, again, creating systems that are fast enough to respond even to UAVs, would you envision that we would need to then have certain regulations on the manufacturers of craft or software to embed the systems that allow them to implement whatever we come together to decide at the international level? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Esther. Those are great questions. Looking at the first aspect on whether it should be sort of from the ground up or from the international down, yeah, I'll take the State Department diplomatic way and say both. But what I think is happening right now in that area is that you really see more of the private sector stepping forward and getting ahead of the government who's trying to catch up. I mean, here in the United States, we have the rulemaking process going on. We won't have a small UAS rule for commercial operations until, I believe, the Secretary of Transportation said until middle of 2016. So until then, all the companies that are out there that want to operate commercially actually have to go through an exception to the process in order to get approval from the FAA to go fly. There are many companies that are doing that, certainly ones that are responsible, legitimate, and want to protect their brand. There are many, many others that don't even understand or know that that process is happening in the United States. And there are a lot of people that are doing business and figuring out how to use drones in that business and inventing, if you will, their own sort of rules on using it. So there is this private aspect that's happening here in the U.S., and I would suspect that that's happening overseas. Many operators will look outside of the United States for opportunities to do commercial business. Canada is seen as one that's rather friendly. There are many countries in Latin America that are also seen as very friendly. Brazil, although some are starting to tighten up the rules just a little bit, because as governments also see an avenue for revenue in these operations as well with taxation, so they're going to regulate it in order to get that there as well. So I would say there's sort of movements on both sides, but I would say right now the private and the users are actually ahead of the government. The government is reacting to that as far as rules and regulations go. I'm going to skip down to your third point for just a second, and that is, can manufacturers actually put something into the drone so that you know, if they're doing something bad, we can click on a switch and make it land? Well, some manufacturers are already doing that by putting geolocation inside their devices, not allowing them to fly in no non-fly zones. Yeah, I'll give you an example of that. Washington, D.C. is a special flight rules zone. You cannot operate a model aircraft within 15 nautical miles of Ronald Reagan Airport outside. We could do it inside all we like. But once you take, it doesn't matter what the size is, anything outside of that, that's a criminal offense that you can be prosecuted for operating that drone. So there's a drone manufacturer, and this is not an endorsement by Perry Center or NDU, but DJI Phantom has put those coordinates in the machine of the White House in D.C., so that theoretically, if you bought your DJI Phantom that I showed up on the screen and turned it on, it wouldn't fly if you were in downtown D.C. Now, as Dr. Trevino will tell you, anybody who uses that USB connector on that DJI Phantom drone and plugs it in to get the firmware update, that you can also go through there and bypass that and disable all those protective devices. So for the amateur, let's call it not really the bad, but the person who just doesn't know any better, that is a good way to keep that machine from flying where it's not supposed to. But if somebody really wants to use that aircraft in D.C., it is possible to do that. And I apologize, but I forgot your second question.
Cooperation from state to international.
Oh yeah, the cooperation's got to be there, and not with just, there is no international piece at this particular point, which is sad. It's all happening within the individual stovepipe nations for those who operate them. So yes, I see that there's a terrific role there for probably state and FAA to use, if not the same bodies that they already use, you know, some combination thereof, to come to an agreement. Because right now we're looking at, you know, these small things here. In 10 years from now, the people who sit up at this stage, we're going to be talking about unmanned cargo airplanes that are doing regular routes across the Atlantic. And so what rules are there in our current processes in place for that? Well, there aren't any, but there should be, and we've already learned that technology has outpaced bureaucracy, so why are we waiting around? Let's move the bureaucracy along and get those institutions and organizations looking at this problem as if we're already there. Thank you. Great questions.
So actually, I've got a question sticking on drones, General Ruggiero. This is actually a question from our Jamaica chapter, who's watching us virtually. So they wanted to know, how can the government balance the use of drones and the privacy of its citizens? And another one that's combined, they're very interested in drones, the Jamaicans. How do you control the spread of illegal drones, and how would you be able to control the weaponization, like actually putting a gun on a drone in the video that you were going to show us, but we don't have? So it was interesting to see. So they're looking at this question of privacy and security, which we always have to balance, but more importantly, in the realm of the drones.
Right. Yeah, the privacy one is very interesting. I mean, if we were all to walk outside and there was a drone hovering outside as we gathered in front of the Lincoln Hall, we'd probably be a little bit concerned. As you saw this anonymous object up there, does it have a microphone? Does it have a camera? Does it have something else? Does it have a LiDAR, hyperspectral? What's it looking at? But more importantly, who's operating it, and what are they doing with the data? Much as Dr. Trevino talked about, who's using the data that is being collected every day on our phone. So it's that anonymous nature of the drone that I think really sort of gives that privacy issue a little bit of fuel. Because if we were to walk outside and there was a security camera that was fixed to a pole, we probably wouldn't have any problem with that, because we know that authorities around here need to keep NDU safe. We'd be okay with that. But the fact that it's on a drone, that there's an unknown operator attached to it, is sort of what gets our attention. Now, certainly, you can put an aircraft, or you can put a camera on any aircraft and fly it around. We don't seem to have too much trouble with that. Google puts a camera on top of its cars and trucks and runs it all over my neighborhood and yours as well, probably, and we don't seem to have a problem with that. So I think it's just trying to get the public's mind aware of the drone, and but it is a tough situation as far as the privacy goes. As far as controlling weaponization, there are a lot of people that would say that there are current laws that are already on the books that just have to be applied to the situation. Let's take the firearm on the drone. Actually, as the lawyers worked through that particular case, to do any kind of provision in the United States, there was no law that just simply prohibits or says you cannot put a gun onto a drone. That law doesn't exist. But there is a law that you cannot drop something out of your airplane unless there are certain circumstances. And in this particular case, that hadn't been done, so it was considered the bullet was dropped from the craft, and so that's where the law was taken from. So the lawyers are going to be very busy, though, as they try to take this new technology and put this into the current structure. So on a day like today when it's turning fall in D.C., I wish I were in Jamaica, but I hope that answers their question.
I think so. It's great. The question all the way here. Dr. Bittencourt, raise your hand so they can see your, they need a microphone.
Thank you. I'm Luis Bittencourt from the Paris Center. I have a hypothetical, but perhaps a little bit technical question. I was just letting my mind flow with your presentations and thinking about the capabilities of those wonderful things that we have, the drones, and putting myself in the shoes of perhaps a bad guy, a terrorist, and thinking about a major sports event. And thinking that perhaps we have too many X-ray machines around that are just abandoned, old machines. And perhaps I could get from the inside of those machines some capsules of cesium-237, which are very damaging and can kill people easily and create a tremendous tragedy if we can have access to that. Could I use one of those things to include some of those capsules inside, fly over a stadium full, let's say, of 70,000 people, and drop those things there? And if this is the case, despite of the regulations that we may think of, are there technical barriers that I can use?
Yeah, I would say, I would go back to the sort of the layers of defense, if you will. If you have things like the right regulations, safety regulations in place, that's first. And then you educate the public on the proper uses of a drone. And in this particular case, right now, anytime that there's a stadium event in the United States that's capable of holding, I believe the number is 50,000 people, there's automatically a temporary flight restriction zone that's put up before the event and until some hours after the event. So what that does is that should keep the vast majority of UASs, if you will, that are going to operate in that area down. So what that does is it's sort of like a filter. It means that the next one that comes across is probably going to be that bad guy who's going to operate in any case, despite the rules and regulations, despite the notices from the government of the temporary flight restriction zone. So in that case, then there has to be some type of counter-UAS system that's in place to physically or electronically take that asset and to protect the people that are there. Yes, can that be done? Yeah, absolutely. Is it technically possible? I think here just this year in Japan, protesters took a UAV, and it wasn't much bigger than the one sitting here, and it had a little vial full of radioactive material. It was a protest for how the government was working with, or not working with, the Fukushima nuclear plant issue, and they landed it on top of the Prime Minister's house. So did that do a lot of damage? No. But the real power right now that rests in vehicles like these on the table is in their communication power, because this is cool. Drones are cool right now, and the media is going to cover absolutely everything having to do with a drone. And if you or a group have a message and you want to broadcast, and you don't really care about the results to yourself or your group afterwards, but if you have a message that you want, send it with a drone, and it'll get publicized. And that's a power that we have to reckon with too, not just the kinetic nature of such an attack.
Great. Other questions? Our director.
It's for Dr. Trevino. Mark Wilkins from the Prairie Center. Many of the people in this audience are defense and security advisors to their civilian masters, to the civilian leaders of their country. And this is one area you described, sort of a digital tsunami that's getting ready to engulf us. And part of their job is to sort of lay out worst case scenarios if we don't get this right. So extrapolating the scenario you laid out for this digital tsunami, what is the worst case if countries don't actively collaborate or ensure sort of voluntary compliance to get ahead of this curve?
Well, let's use the word singularity versus tsunami. Very different. There are a lot of projections as to what the worst cases will be. I'll say we don't know. We really don't. If we don't come together in a meaningful way and work out the policies, the strategies, the definitions, and pull together the cutting-edge research with every other environment, even those countries that are just catching up. The disparity there also becomes in that we tend to fund the military organizations, and you see this in LAC economies. The money goes towards the military intelligence apparatuses versus the cyber crime apparatuses. Okay, and it becomes disproportionate. Where cyber crime, we have seen multiple reports from the various producers. RSA, for example, produced a report a couple years ago on one of the worms, Moldevo. It was a banking Trojan a couple years ago that stole an estimated $3.8 billion. Commercial industry publishes reports all the time that billions of dollars are stolen, yet 80% of the money goes away from those institutions who would work those problems, or certainly not to research, because if current methods of locking things down throwing hundreds or thousands of digital forensic analysts isn't going to work, then we should be putting our money in leapfrogging into that technology that might work, even if it's a few years away. Keep working the hard things, but fund the research that is going to actually solve the problem in a few years. What's the worst case scenario? There was one of the presidents from one of the research antivirus type companies that gave a talk in Washington a couple years ago, and he said, if we're not careful, we may look back on today with reverence. The days when the lights worked and the trains ran and computers, when you click the button, things turned on. As we create innumerable new vectors for bad people to do things. If the security doesn't catch up, and security is a big thing, it's education, it's the technology, it's endpoint, it's midpoint, all kinds of things. If we don't get a handle on this wicked problem, the consequences are just too big to even contemplate. It would be a shame to progress, and in the future, the lights didn't work, or the car wouldn't turn on, or worse yet, someone turned it on when you were asleep in their garage and revved up the engine to the point where it burned out, and you woke up in the next morning and found it. All those sorts of things are doable today, and we see it, with white and rogue hackers today. We can't not do this as a world, as a human society. And it's not even, we have to frame this properly. It's not just a security problem, okay? It's a global economic competitiveness problem. Strategy is my world, and looking at our civilian counterparts, nation-state competitiveness is big, right? Everyone wants to have a good economy. Everyone wants to have a strong economy, jobs for our people, education, all these things. The security of the Internet of Things, our industries, our organizations, is not just a security problem. It's a nation-state economic problem. Because the Internet of Things offers one of those rare opportunities for nations all over the world, Latin American economies, to leapfrog forward. The Internet of Things is going to provide an opportunity for disruption for Latin American economies, southern economies, to leapfrog forward, to create endless amounts of value, millions of new jobs, all kinds of things. It is a rare opportunity in human history, and we're at the cusp of it. We can't abdicate that opportunity for economic prosperity and delivering value to the average person, which is where much of the IoT is going to give, to the human being. Lots of value is going to come to the individual user. We simply can't let that get away from us. There's too much at stake. Our economic futures, our children's futures, all that we hope to be, really is at stake. So it's not just a security problem, it's an economic problem as well.
We have a question here in the fourth row. Microphone, here.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm General Leonel, Brazilian military attaché. Thanks for the briefing. All of them very interesting, very objective. My question is open for all speakers, but I'll direct it specifically for Professor Trevino, which is, could you please give us some of your comments on the current status of interagency cooperation within the U.S., and based on that, what would be your thoughts on the challenges to international cooperation policies? Thank you.
I'll take the first stab at that, but open to everyone, of course. So I'm in a unique position because I work for a United States intelligence agency. So But across the federal government, when it comes to cybersecurity, there is actually very good cooperation. Of course, it flows at different levels, and not everybody is as cooperative. But overall, everyone understands. The United States is generally very conscious of cybersecurity issues, both cyber crime and cyber warfare issues. Every week there is a new hack in the news, from the OPM hack, where a lot of federal employees' data was taken, to Sony, to university hacks, to they're so innumerable. Most people don't really understand the gravity. How many hacks, how many attacks are out there. It is widely publicized that the DoD suffers millions of cyber attacks every day. Brazilian government, same. Tens of thousands your government has published every day are targeted at them. So everyone understands the nature of the problem, and everyone understands, I think, that we need to come together, especially within the U.S. government, to do that. How they do that is the problem. It's a question of very specific authorities, very specific lanes of operation. In the U.S., it's happening probably as good as it is anywhere in the world. We're trying to lead the way in that regard, defining all the various aspects of it and trying to link interagency cooperation. We could do a better job. That's it. We can do better. We could, big data offers tremendous opportunities to both prevent and mitigate any sort of cyber attack out there, and exchanging data is not always easy between agencies. Distrust is among the different agencies. That all multiplies times 10 as you go on a nation-state level. As I came here, I represent the National Security Agency of the United States. Your government has said a number of things regarding our agency. But that said, there are civilian counterparts. There are Homeland Security is doing an awesome job tackling a wicked problem. It just is. The United States, like every other country, has critical infrastructure, key resources that have to be guarded. We have to enable them. But how prescriptive do you get becomes the question. Government. We simply move too slow as a federal government to get ahead of the problem. So it has to be a collaborative effort. Now, I think there is some solution in methodology, in how we do this. If you're familiar with design thinking, okay, so strategy is my world, and how do you iterate strategy? Well, there are all kinds of really new, cool techniques out in the world. There are organizations that have taken 9-month strategy cycles and turned them into 9 days. We can learn from Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley firms use what they call design thinking and ambidextrous work structures. And they have reduced their strategy and decision-making cycles from weeks and months to hours and minutes, days at the most. Now that works a whole lot better. We have to figure out a way to integrate design thinking and different work structures in all governments in an effort to help us, because it's an iterative problem. No one decision is going to do it. The environment changes too quickly. So design thinking becomes perfect because it's iterative. It's constant. You're constantly working and developing solutions, to these issues. The last piece of it is we have to come to mutual understandings. In that, we're all sovereign countries. We're all sovereign nations. Each of our problems is different. There is no homogeneous problem out there, other than maybe at a very high level, cyber crime. Okay, we all suffer from cyber crime. But again, United States problems are different from Brazil's problems, are different from Ecuador's problems, are different from Mexico's problems. They're all slightly different. We're going to have to get past distrust. We're going to have to work together to solve this on a global scale, because otherwise the forces just pull and they will always find an opening. I think it begins with acknowledgement of the problem, acknowledgement that the way we're doing things today and yesterday don't work very well. We're going to have to change. It goes into research, the national labs, organizations, think tanks, and we're going to have to share that knowledge and that research. Those things happening. I don't see too many Latin American countries at those meetings. You guys are absent from those when you should not be. You have to reach out and find out where that cutting-edge research is happening and get invited to the table. You just can't not be. You can't, even if you doubled your budget, again, and you added 1,000 more forensics guys, it wouldn't make a difference to the problem. But if you get involved with the research happening in cutting-edge places in Europe and America, get invited to the table, there's where the future solutions are going to be. And there's no reason that there's not a good partnership. We're all in this together.
So I have actually a follow-up question to that. So here in the United States, we define and categorize different cyber threats, right? So there's nation state, there's terrorists, there's criminal, hacktivists versus hackers. Do you think that we're actually limiting ourselves? Because as we ascribe, so in the United States, the private sector, their cyber issues are governed by the FBI, and then .gov is managed by the Homeland Security, and then your folks, as well as Cyber Command, take care of the .mil space. Some people are actually arguing that by categorizing and then ascribing these threats that are put into this category to one agency, we're actually limiting ourselves. I'm just wondering, because your team really looks forward and tries to forecast, as opposed to that all these threats are a threat to national security. Maybe we need to rethink how we're using these categories.
So yes, so as cyberspace came online and the acknowledgement of how critical it would be from a military standpoint, okay, as cyberspace is denoted as, you know, what the sixth, you know, domain of warfare, you know, so land, air, space, sea, you know, and cyber. But cyber's fully integrated into everything that we do. Everything every nation state does. Again, it's not just a security issue, it's a nation state economic competitiveness issue. If a nation wants to be competitive in the future, they're just going to have to bring the technology, the infrastructure up to speed and adopt, you know, policies and things that are not oppressive, but, you know, but are enabling the good things to come out while trying to you know, mitigate the bad. Our current constructs are going to break down. They just are. We talk about cyberspace and prep the battle space. You know, it's not the same analogy as a land-air battle. So we use terminology that's familiar to us. We talk about the Internet of Things, home, auto, you know, wearables, medical. I think those things break down. I think we're going to need a novel structure, a novel way of looking at things to get our heads wrapped around it. We have kicked around the concept of what we use the Greek word praxi, as for the praxisphere, that when we hit this singularity, it's not going, we're not going to be able to define as, oh, this is a wearable and this is an auto. It's not going to matter other than selling the item to the consumer. It's all going to be blended in this way that it's going to be very difficult to make sense of. We're going to need a whole new construct. We're going to need something based probably more on holons, embedded structures within embedded structures within embedded structures, and seamless, no borders to it. So the term, the praxisphere that we use, is all things blended together and embedded structures. Things fade out, things fade in. Nothing is going to exist at all times. It's going to be exceedingly dynamic and almost impossible to model out. But as something comes here, it's going to fade over here, and information is flow here and up and then disappear. This concept of this all things together, but all embedded, seamless, if you will, with no borders. So I don't know what the future technology or how we actually theorize all this, but this is really, really cool work. You're absolutely right. Thinking of things as home and auto and even this is a terrorist problem, this is a crime, a banking problem. Yeah, we have to have some of those delineations. But really, 20, 25 years from now, are we going to be thinking about those things? Yeah, and then you have to look at the development of technology. At some point in the future, quantum is going to come online, and it's going to alter the fabric of everything.
Great. We have a question up here. There's a here on the question. Microphone.
Flaming Duarte from the Paraguay Embassy, counselor. What would be the role of the international organization, if there is a role at all? And what kind of organizational design has to be in the future, like the PPP, as you mentioned before, for the panel?
Well, I think international organization is going to play a major role. OAS already have something to deal with cybersecurity. But the problem is not the issue of cyber or unmanned system or new technology. The problem is the way how the international organization behave. It's about policy. It's about how they deal with security issues. In the case of OAS, the OAS have the same way to deal with cyber, the way they deal with other issues of security in other domain. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because when you deal with cyber or unmanned system or new technology, you need to weigh the way you think. And this organization work in the traditional way. When you work and you see the problem in traditional way, the organization don't go anywhere. And that's the problem I see in the OAS. They get together, they discuss about the issue, and they think, writing a paper, sending a communication to the countries, hey, it's something you need to deal with. Try to do it if you have the political will. No, it doesn't work in that way. And I see the United Nations and OAS, when deal with cyberspace and cybersecurity, they want to deal with common sense. But sometimes common sense is the less common of all sense that we have. It doesn't work. You need to weigh how you think about it, and I don't see this at this time. In the case of OEA or United Nations, they are going in the right path that Dr. Trevino mentioned, to think about the complexity. Because when you're talking about cybersecurity, it's not because the troops or somewhere is going to attack you. No, it's more than that. It's the way of life. Your way of life, as we live today here, is threat in all dimensions. If you consider a security with the traditional way to think, with that rationality, never ever we will succeed in this domain of cybersecurity, where our human sense have nothing to do. Nobody can tell me how it looks like cyber, how it smells, it have touch, it have nothing. Our human sense are worthless. Doesn't work in that. That's the way I think we need to change. An international organization, I right behind dealing and thinking about this problem.
We have time for one more question here on the aisle.
So thank you all for taking the time to talk about this very important topic. I'm Christopher Zember, co-director of the Center for Technology and National Security Policy here. My question for General Ruggiero. You mentioned briefly that there were some companies testing UASs up in Canada. I believe I read a congressional report that talked about Amazon doing some testing over in China because it was more friendly. If there's a drone regulation maturity model index, maybe, could you give us an indication of where the U.S. would fall or who's in the lead globally? And then speak to some of the risks from an economic point of view and a national security point of view, assuming that the U.S. is not necessarily in the lead in that area.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the question, Christopher. The answer is shifting, but gradually. If you look at competitiveness and amongst international companies or countries, I would have said last year that to look to the UK, to look to Canada, to look to Australia and New Zealand. I believe Google has actually been down in New Zealand for over a year doing their testing down there. I would have said those countries are a little bit more switched on to the economic potential of opening up the markets to the unmanned aerial systems before we are. Now, since that time, the U.S. has put together several test sites around the country, and also a UAS Center of Excellence down at Mississippi State. It's a public-private partnership. So it's still very young, but I think that those eventually are going to grow and take root, and already we're seeing some successes. Just down at Virginia Tech, which is one of the test sites, they've established a news media training. So there's CNN, NBC, many others are down there working on the best way to do media and use drones in media production, and then to train those around the country to operate that. So that's going to spur the economy, and I think the other test sites will eventually get going. Unfortunately, it's been a slow start. But if I wanted to do it right today, I would probably get in the truck and go up to Canada. That would be economically feasible. Go down to New Zealand or Australia and start up there. Or some of the Latin American countries certainly would be a little bit more friendly towards that aspect. But thank you.
Great. Well, as you can see, we've had a really quite fact-filled, and more importantly, it's really given us tons of food for thought about emerging technologies, but even more so, underscoring the importance that governments, as well as leaders in other sectors of our society, including the public sector, private sector, members of our own community, and ourselves, need to keep up with, and we need to evolve along with these emerging technologies. We have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. We did not coordinate on that, I just realized that. But also there's a big debate. So cyber is the new domain, the sixth domain, when we look at it from a military perspective. But there's a big debate if cyber should be a new instrument of national power, or that it is an enabler of the existing instruments of national power. So we're undergoing a course right now looking at defense and security policies, and that's a great way to kind of start thinking about how to incorporate the advantages of new technology, like the use of drones and unmanned systems, but also how to mitigate the risks that come along with these different technologies. So I'd like to, let's give a round of applause for our presenters today. And I'd like to thank all of you for spending the afternoon with us, either here at the auditorium or more importantly online, and to preview that our next Hemispheric Forum will be Wednesday, November 18th at 1:30, to actually be entitled The Changing Western Hemisphere. It's going to be featuring a new publication of PRISM, a journal that's going to be dedicated to the security challenges of Latin America. And our featured keynote speakers will be General Kelly, the commander of Southern Command, as well as Ambassador Pinzon of Colombia, who's just stepped down as the defense minister. And you can join us live in person or also online, and that will be on November 18th. Thank you so much for your participation, and hopefully you've learned a little bit more about emerging technologies. Thanks so much.